The first sign something was wrong came at 1423 Universal Standard Time. Every human colony across 17 star systems went silent at exactly the same moment. Not a technical glitch, not a solar storm. Complete, total silence. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's flagship, watching the communication boards flash red across the galaxy. Her withered hands gripped the rail as she processed what she was seeing. In 30 years of service, she had never witnessed anything like this. Admiral. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb called out from his station, his voice cracking slightly. We've lost contact with New Terra, Kepler Station, and the entire Proxima system. That's 12 million people, Mom. Sarah's jaw tightened. 12 million. The number hit her like a physical blow. These weren't just statistics on a screen. These were families, children, scientists, farmers, artists, people who had left Earth generations ago to build new worlds among the stars. Keep trying, she ordered. Though she already knew it was useless, the silence was to complete, the coordinated. This was an equipment failure. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, rushed onto the bridge. Her usually pristine lab coat was wrinkled, and her dark eyes were wide with fear. Admiral, I've been monitoring the quantum communication arrays. The patterns suggest. God help us, I think this was intentional. Before Sarah could respond, the ship's main view screen flickered to life. The image that appeared made every person on the bridge freeze in horror. A massive alien structure hung in space above what had once been the thriving colony world of New Terra. The planet's surface glowed with an unnatural orange light, and even from orbit, they could see the massive craters where cities had stood just hours ago. The alien ship was unlike anything in human databases. Organic curves mixed with crystalline structures, easily 10 times the size of Earth's largest battleships. My God, whispered Marcus. What is that thing? Sarah's hands were shaking now, but her voice remained steady. Get me a full scan, everything, and send an emergency transmission to Earth Command. Tell them we may be at war. As if responding to her words, the alien ship began to move. It turned slowly, revealing symbols along its hull that pulsed with the same orange light as the dying planet below. The symbols were arranged in a pattern that human linguists would later recognize as a warning. But at that moment, they looked like nothing more than alien hieroglyphs. Admiral, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission. It's from the ship. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was not quite human, not quite mechanical. It spoke in perfect English, but with an accent that belonged to no Earth nation, human vessel. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. The Galactic Council has rendered its judgment. Your species' expansion ends here. Sarah stepped forward, her military bearing, never wavering despite the fear coursing through her veins. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Force. By what authority do you? By the authority of species far older and wiser than yours. The voice interrupted. You have spread like a plague across the galaxy, consuming resources, establishing colonies without permission, acting as if the universe belongs to you alone. The Council has decided that humanity's time is over. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing her own disbelief reflected in their faces. They had always known that humanity wasn't alone in the galaxy. There had been hints, traces of other civilizations in their exploration of distant systems. But this was first contact, and it was genocide. How many? Sarah asked quietly. Marcus was frantically working at his station, pulling up colony reports from before the blackout. 17 systems, Admiral. 43 colonies. Population estimates suggest approximately 15 million humans across all affected areas. 15 million gone. In less than an hour. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the weight of those numbers. When she opened them again, her expression had changed. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, something that made her crew unconsciously straighten their shoulders. Plot a course for the nearest affected system, she ordered, and send word to every human ship. station and colony that's still responding. Tell them what we've seen here. Tell them that humanity is under attack. Mum, Marcus said hesitantly. What if there are more of those ships? What if we're walking into a trap? Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. Then we'll spring it, and we'll make sure the galaxy remembers what happens when you threaten the human race. As the Defiance changed course, racing toward the next silent system, none of them could have imagined what they would find there, or what humanity would become in the hours and days that followed. The age of human expansion was over. The age of human vengeance was about to begin. Chapter 2. The testimony of survivors that used Defiance dropped out of hyperspace. At the edge of the Kepler system, and what Sarah saw there would haunt her for the rest of her life. The once thriving industrial complex that had been humanity's furthest reach into the galaxy was now a graveyard of twisted metal and burning debris. My God, Dr. Vasquez whispered, her hands pressed against the observation window. The orbital stations, they're all gone. Where Kepler Station had once hosted nearly 2 million people, now only fragments remained. Chunks of hull plating drifted past the ship's viewports, some still glowing from the heat of whatever weapon had destroyed them. Among the debris, Sarah could make out what looked like escape pods, but they were dark and cold, scanning for life signs. Marcus reported, his voice hollow. I'm detecting. Wait, there's something. It's faint, but there are survivors in one of the emergency shelters on Kepler 4. Sarah's heart jumped. Survivors. After seeing the devastation at New Terra, she hadn't dared hope that anyone had escaped the attacks. Take us in maximum speed. As they approached the small mining world, the scope of the destruction became clear. The planet's surface was scarred with massive craters, some still glowing with residual energy. The atmospheric processors that had made this world habitable were silent and dark. But deep underground, in the emergency bunkers that every human colony maintained, a small group of people had somehow survived. The rescue took 4 hours. When the shuttle finally docked with the Defiance's main bay, Sarah was waiting personally to greet the survivors. 23 people stumbled out of the shuttle, their eyes wide with shell shock and their faces streaked with tears. The first person Sarah spoke to was Dr. Michael Harrison, a geologist who had been working deep in the planet's core when the attack began. His hand shook as he accepted a cup of coffee from one of the ship's crew. They came without warning, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. One moment we were tracking mineral deposits. The next the ground was shaking like the world was ending. The surface teams, they tried to evacuate, but the ships came so fast. Sarah sat across from him in the ship's conference room, trying to maintain her composure as she listened to his account. Behind her, Dr. Vasquez was taking notes, preparing what would become the first official record of the Galactic Council's attack on humanity. Did you see the attackers? Sarah asked gently. Michael nodded, his eyes distant. The ships were massive, not like anything we've ever built. They looked alive, somehow, like they were grown instead of constructed. And the weapons, he shuddered. They weren't just trying to destroy our buildings. They were trying to wipe out every trace that we'd ever been here. Another survivor, a woman named Lisa Park who had been a communications officer at the orbital station, spoke up. They broadcast something before they attacked, a message in our own language. They said humanity was a disease that needed to be cured. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Did they say anything else? They mentioned the Galactic Council, said we were being, what was the word they used? Sanitized, like we were some kind of contamination. As the interviews continued, a clearer picture emerged. The attacks had been coordinated across multiple systems, timed to prevent any warning from reaching unaffected colonies. The alien ships had used weapons that seemed to target organic matter specifically, leaving some structures intact while reducing human bodies to ash. But the most chilling revelation came from Tommy Chen, a 12-year-old boy who had been visiting the station with his family. His parents hadn't made it to the shelters in time, and he was now the only survivor of his family. They talked to us, Tommy said, his young voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. Before they hurt everyone. They said humans were too dangerous to live. That we broke some kind of law by spreading to so many worlds. Sarah knelt down to the boy's level, her heart breaking for him. What law, Tommy, did they say? They said we weren't supposed to leave our home planet, that there were rules about which species could explore space, and we broke them. They said we were like weeds in a garden, and they had to pull us out before we spread too far. The conference room fell silent. The implications of what Tommy had said were staggering. If the boy was right, humanity had unknowingly violated some kind of galactic law by expanding beyond Earth, and the punishment was extinction. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. Tommy, did they say anything about other species, other civilizations? The boy nodded. They said there were lots of different people living in the galaxy, but they all followed the rules. They said humans were the only ones who didn't know their place. Sarah stood up, her mind racing. If there was a galactic council, if there were rules governing space exploration, then humanity had been living in ignorance for centuries. They had thought they were alone in the galaxy, free to explore and colonize as they wished. Instead, they had been trespassing on territory that belonged to others. But that didn't justify genocide. Admiral Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. They want to speak with you immediately. Sarah looked at the survivors. These 23 people who represented all that remained. Of 2 million lives, get them settled in guest quarters, full medical examinations, trauma counseling, whatever they need. And Marcus, start preparing casualty reports. Earth Command is going to want exact numbers. As she walked to the bridge, Sarah's mind was already working on the next problem. The survivors had given them crucial intelligence about the attackers, but they still had no idea how many ships the Galactic Council had, or where they might strike next. What she did know was that humanity now faced extinction, and if the galaxy thought humans would go quietly into the night, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The transmission from Earth Command was brief and chilling. The attacks had been even more widespread than they had initially thought. 7 additional systems had gone dark in the past 6 hours, bringing the total death toll to over 20 million people. But Earth Command also had news that changed everything. Long-range sensors had detected massive alien fleets moving toward the Sol system itself. The Galactic Council wasn't just trying to stop human expansion. They were coming for Earth. Sarah stared at the tactical display showing the approaching fleets. Hundreds of ships, each one as large as the vessel that had destroyed New Terra. Against them, humanity could field perhaps 50 major warships and a few hundred smaller vessels. It should have been hopeless. Any rational military commander would have started planning evacuations, looking for ways to save at least some of the human population. Instead, Sarah found herself smiling. It was not a pleasant expression. Marcus, she said quietly. How long until those fleets reach Earth, based on their current speed? Approximately 72 hours, Sarah nodded. 72 hours. It wasn't much time, but it might be enough. Signal all remaining human ships. Tell them to rendezvous at coordinates I'm about to send you. And Marcus, tell them to bring every weapon they have. We're going to give the Galactic Council a lesson in human nature. As the Defiance changed course once again, this time heading toward what would become the greatest battle in human history. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The attacks had been too coordinated, too precise. It was as if the Galactic Council had been planning this for years. But if they had been watching humanity for so long, studying their expansion across the galaxy, then surely they would have learned something about human nature. About what happened when you cornered a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a world as hostile as Earth. The Galactic Council was about to discover that they had made a terrible mistake. They had not just attacked humanity's colonies, they had attacked humanity's children. And there was no force in the galaxy more dangerous than an angry human parent. Chapter 3. The Wrath of Terry. The rendezvous point Sarah had chosen was the asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter, a region of space that had been humanity's first major mining operation beyond Earth. Now, as ships from across the remaining human colonies converged on the coordinates, it was about to become something else entirely. the staging ground for humanity's last stand. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, watching as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace. The sight should have been inspiring, but instead it filled her with a cold dread. She had called for every available vessel, and this was what humanity could muster: 47 warships of various sizes, 32 cargo haulers hastily converted to carry weapons, and 19 civilian vessels whose crews had refused to evacuate. Against the hundreds of ships approaching Earth, it was laughably inadequate. Admiral Dr. Vasquez approached, carrying a data pad. I've been analyzing the weapon signatures from the attacks. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases, but there's something strange about them. Sarah turned away from the window. Strange how? They're incredibly efficient at destroying organic matter, but they seem to have difficulty with certain types of metal alloys. The survivors from Kepler Station mentioned that some of the mining equipment survived the attacks intact. So maybe we're not as outgunned as we think. These ships were designed to kill humans, not to fight other spacecraft. They might be vulnerable to conventional weapons. Sarah felt a spark of hope. What about their ships? Any weaknesses? Dr. Vasquez hesitated. This is just speculation, but based on the visual records from the attacks, their ships appear to be at least partially organic. If that's true, they might be susceptible to biological weapons. We don't have any biological weapons. No, but we have something else, something uniquely human. Before Sarah could ask what she meant, Marcus's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Admiral to the bridge. We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Sarah hurried to the bridge, where she found her crew gathered around the main display. The image on the screen was Admiral James Harrison, the head of Earth's Space Forces and one of Sarah's oldest friends, Sarah. He said without preamble, "The enemy fleets will reach Earth in 18 hours. We've managed to evacuate about 60% of the population to the underground shelters, but," he paused, looking older than his 70 years. "We both know those shelters won't matter if they use the same weapons they used on the colonies." Sarah nodded grimly. "What about the defense platforms? All operational. But we're not kidding ourselves. These aliens have technology we can't match. The best we can do is try to buy time for the evacuation efforts." "Jim," Sarah said quietly, "what if I told you we might have a chance?" Harrison's eyes sharpened. "What kind of chance?" "The kind that requires every human ship in the galaxy to work together. The kind that means we stop playing defense and start playing offense." The plan Sarah outlined was audacious to the point of insanity. Instead of trying to defend Earth directly, the human fleet would split into 3 groups. One would remain at Earth, putting up a token resistance to draw the enemy's attention. The second would attack the alien supply lines, disrupting their ability to sustain a prolonged assault. The third, led by the Defiance, would do something no rational military commander would ever consider. They would take the fight directly to the Galactic Council. "You're talking about a suicide mission," Harrison said flatly. "I'm talking about making them regret ever hearing the word human," Sarah replied. "Jim, they killed 20 million of our people, children, families, scientists, trying to build a better future. They came to our worlds like exterminators, treating us like vermin to be eliminated." She gestured to the tactical display, where the positions of the approaching alien fleets were marked in red. "They think they know us. They think they understand what humans are capable of, but they've made one crucial mistake, which is..." Sarah's smile was sharp and cold. "They've never seen us truly angry." The next 12 hours were a frenzy of preparation. Ships were refueled, weapons were loaded, and crews were briefed on their assignments. The plan was complex, requiring precise timing and coordination across multiple star systems. But as Sarah watched her people work, she felt a fierce pride in what humanity had accomplished. These were the descendants of the species that had survived ice ages, conquered diseases, and eventually reached for the stars. They were the children of Earth, and they would not go quietly into extinction. The first phase of the plan began 6 hours before the alien fleets reached Earth. The diversionary force, led by Captain Rebecca Torres on the UES Vengeance, struck at what appeared to be a supply convoy in the Centauri system. The attack was deliberately noisy, designed to draw attention and make the aliens think that humanity was scattering in panic. Meanwhile, the second group, commanded by Admiral Harrison himself, began hitting targets across 3 star systems. They weren't trying to destroy the alien ships. That was impossible with their limited firepower. Instead, they were targeting something else entirely: the organic components of the alien vessels. Dr. Vasquez's analysis had been correct. The alien ships were partially biological, which made them vulnerable to a uniquely human weapon: disease. The human ships fired modified mining charges filled with Earth bacteria, fungi, and viruses. Separately, these microorganisms were harmless to the alien technology. Together, they created a biological soup that began eating away at the organic components of the enemy vessels. But the real surprise was waiting for the main alien fleet as it approached Earth. Sarah watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of vessels, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering, arranged in perfect formation as they began their approach toward humanity's homeworld. "They're beautiful," Dr. Vasquez murmured, watching the displays, "and terrifying." The lead ship was larger than the others, its hull covered in the same pulsing symbols they had seen at New Terra. As it drew closer to Earth, it began broadcasting on all frequencies. "People of Earth," the voice was the same one they had heard at New Terra, emotionless and final. "You have been judged by the Galactic Council. Your expansion across the galaxy has been deemed a threat to the established order. You will surrender unconditionally, or you will be eliminated." Sarah had been waiting for this moment. She opened a channel to the alien fleet, her voice carrying across space to the massive ships approaching her homeworld. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Force. You came to our colonies like cowards in the night, killing families and children while they slept. You think you know what humans are capable of. You think you understand our nature." She paused, looking around at her crew. Every person on the bridge was staring at her with absolute trust, ready to follow her into hell itself. "You're about to learn how wrong you are." The first human ship to attack was the UES Defiance itself. It broke from the asteroid field, racing toward the alien fleet at maximum speed. Behind it came the rest of the human vessels, outnumbered 10 to 1, but moving with a coordination that spoke of generations of military tradition. The aliens responded exactly as Sarah had hoped. They focused their attention on the human ships, bringing their awesome weapons to bear on the attacking fleet. Ship after ship was destroyed, their crews dying in the cold of space. But their sacrifice was not in vain. While the aliens were distracted, the real attack began, hidden throughout the solar system, disguised as asteroids and debris, were thousands of human-built missiles. Each one was primitive by alien standards, little more than a rocket with a nuclear warhead. But they had one advantage that the aliens hadn't counted on: they were too small and too numerous to track effectively. The missiles struck the alien fleet from every direction, their nuclear warheads detonating against ships that had never faced such crude but effective weapons. The aliens' defensive systems were designed to counter sophisticated energy weapons, not the brute force approach that humanity had perfected. And then came the real surprise. "Now," Sarah whispered, "from the surface of Earth, from the hidden bases on the Moon, from the colonies on Mars, came humanity's secret weapon. Not advanced technology or alien science, but something far more dangerous: human creativity and human rage." The missiles that struck the alien fleet in the second wave weren't armed with nuclear warheads. They carried something else entirely: modified computer viruses designed to infiltrate and corrupt the alien ship's control systems. The viruses were based on human neural patterns, designed to think and adapt like human minds. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The alien ships began turning on each other, their own weapons systems compromised by the viral infections. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos as vessels that had been coordinated by the Galactic Council's network found themselves fighting their own allies. Sarah watched in grim satisfaction as the alien fleet tore itself apart. This was what happened when you underestimated humanity. They had thought humans were simple, predictable, easily eliminated. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human genome for millennia, the survival instinct of a species that had fought its way to the top of the food chain. But even as the alien fleet destroyed itself, Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The Galactic Council would not ignore this defeat. They would send more ships, stronger weapons, deadlier tactics. Humanity had won its first battle against the galaxy. But the war was far from over. Chapter 4, The Galactic Reckoning. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, as historians would later call it, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The massive crystalline structure that served as their headquarters, suspended in the void between galaxies, had not seen such urgency in over 10,000 years. Representative Zerthul of the hegemony species stood before the assembled delegates, his forearms gesturing in the ritualistic patterns that denoted extreme concern. The being's translucent skin flickered with agitated patterns of light as he addressed the chamber. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber through quantum translators. "The human situation has escalated beyond our most pessimistic projections. Our sanitization fleet has been completely destroyed, and the humans have begun expanding." A low murmur rippled through the chamber. The word expanding carried particular weight in Galactic Council terminology. It meant that a species was not only surviving, but actively growing stronger. Representative Kexala of the Wise Ones floated forward, her energy form pulsing with ancient authority, explained the extent of their expansion. Zerthul's skin patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating reluctance to deliver bad news. In the 3 months since the Battle of Earth, human forces have established new colonies in 47 star systems. They have also recruited allies. The chamber fell silent. In the 50,000-year history of the Galactic Council, no species had ever recruited allies after being marked for sanitization. The very concept was unprecedented. "What kind of allies?" Kexala asked, her energy form brightening with concern. "Several species that we had previously classified as safely contained, the Vrex mining guilds, the Tal'Daran traders, even some of the synthetic collective units. The humans have offered them something we never considered, true partnership instead of supervised coexistence." Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the International Space Station, but was now the command center for humanity's expanding military forces. The view outside the station's windows showed the controlled chaos of a species preparing for war. On a galactic scale, massive construction ships were building new vessels using designs that incorporated the best of human engineering with technology. Reverse engineered from the captured alien ships, the vessels were ugly by alien standards, all angles and aggressive lines, but they were functional and deadly. Admiral Dr. Vasquez approached, now wearing the uniform of humanity's first xenobiological warfare division. "We've successfully tested the latest batch of adaptive viruses. They're capable of learning and evolving in real time to counter alien defensive measures." Sarah nodded, though the thought of using biological weapons still made her uncomfortable. But the Galactic Council had established the rules of this conflict when they chose genocide as their solution to the human problem. "What about our new allies?" she asked. "The Vrex are proving remarkably effective at infiltrating Council supply lines. Their natural mining abilities let them hide in asteroid fields and strike without warning. The Tal'Daran have provided us with star charts showing every Council facility within 1,000 light-years." In the synthetic collective, Dr. Vasquez paused, a slight smile on her face. "They've been upgrading our computer systems with quantum processing arrays that make our tactical networks nearly instantaneous." Sarah walked to the main display, where a three-dimensional map of the galaxy showed the current state of the conflict. Red dots marked Council territories, blue dots showed human-controlled systems, and green dots represented their allies. The pattern was clear. Humanity was not just surviving, it was thriving. They made a mistake. Sarah said quietly, "The Council assumed that by destroying our colonies, they would break our will to fight. Instead, they showed us exactly what we were fighting for. The truth was more complex than that. And Sarah knew it. the attack on human colonies had indeed broken something in the human psyche, but it hadn't broken their will to fight. It had broken their willingness to play by anyone else's rules. The human forces that now swept across the galaxy were not the same species that had peacefully explored the stars for centuries. They were harder, more ruthless, and infinitely more creative in their approach to warfare. Where the Galactic Council used overwhelming force and superior technology, humans used unpredictability and adaptation. A typical human attack might involve a small fleet of ships disguised as trade vessels carrying a combination of computer, viruses, biological weapons, and teams of human marines trained in zero-gravity combat. The humans would strike without warning, disable the target's defenses, and then offer the survivors a choice: join humanity's growing alliance or face the consequences of continued loyalty to the Council. Most chose to join. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb called from his station. "We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to negotiate." Sarah's eyebrows rose. In all her years of military service, she had never heard of the Galactic Council negotiating with a species they had marked for extinction. Put it through. The figure that appeared on the main screen was unlike anything in human databases. It seemed to be made of living light, constantly shifting and changing, with no fixed form. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of millennia. "I am Speaker Velter of the Galactic Council. I address Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Military Forces." Sarah stepped forward, maintaining her military bearing despite the alien nature of the being she was addressing. "I'm listening. The Council has reconsidered its position regarding your species. We are prepared to offer you a place within the galactic community, with full rights and protections, if you will cease your current military actions and withdraw to your original territory." Sarah considered the offer for exactly 3 seconds. "No." The light being's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "You refuse our offer of peace." "I refuse your offer of surrender," Sarah corrected. "You came to our worlds and murdered 20 million innocent people. You treated us like vermin to be exterminated. Now you want to negotiate because we've proven we can fight back. The Council acknowledges that errors were made in the initial assessment of your species. We are prepared to make reparations." Sarah's smile was cold and hard. "Reparations? You want to pay us for the lives you took, for the children you murdered, for the families you destroyed?" She gestured to the tactical display, where the red dots representing Council territory were steadily being replaced by blue and green ones. "Here's my counter-offer. The Galactic Council will dissolve itself and turn over all authority to a new interspecies federation based on equality and mutual respect. Every species currently under Council control will be given the right to choose their own government, and every Council member involved in the decision to exterminate humanity will surrender themselves for trial." The light being's form brightened with what was clearly anger. "You would demand the surrender of beings who have guided the galaxy for 50,000 years. I would demand justice for 20 million dead humans, and if we refuse," Sarah's smile widened, "then you'll discover what happens when you try to exterminate a species that refuses to die." The transmission cut out, leaving the command center in silence. Sarah knew that her ultimatum meant that the conflict would escalate. The Galactic Council would not surrender peacefully, and the war that followed would consume thousands of star systems. But as she looked around at her crew, at the humans and aliens working together to build something new, she felt a sense of hope that had nothing to do with military victory. Humanity had not just survived the Council's attempt at genocide, they had proven that there was another way to organize galactic civilization, not through domination and control, but through cooperation and mutual respect. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous species is not the one with the most advanced technology or the largest military. Sometimes the most dangerous species is the one that refuses to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. The war for the galaxy's future was just beginning. ## Epilogue. The New Dawn 5 years after the first attack on New Terra. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, the new capital of the Galactic Federation. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built using the best technology from dozens of species working together as equals. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see ships from across the galaxy docking at the station's massive ports. Sleek Tal'Daran vessels shared space with blocky human cruisers, while the crystalline ships of the former Council species glided alongside the impossible geometries of the synthetic collective's vessels. Hard to believe. It's been 5 years, Dr. Elena Vasquez said, joining Sarah at the window. She now served as the Federation's Director of Interspecies Relations, a position that hadn't existed before humanity's war against the Council. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, Sarah replied. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago. The war had ended not with a final battle, but with a revolution. As more and more species joined humanity's alliance, the Galactic Council had found itself increasingly isolated. The final blow came when the hegemony species, one of the Council's founding members, announced that they were withdrawing from the organization and requesting membership in the new Federation. Within months, the Council had collapsed entirely. Some of its former members had joined the Federation, while others had chosen to withdraw to their homeworlds and pursue isolationist policies. A few had tried to maintain the old ways, but without the Council's united authority, they had been unable to resist the tide of change sweeping across the galaxy. Any word from the exploration fleets? Sarah asked. Elena smiled. The Morrison reached the Andromeda relay station last week. They're reporting first contact with at least 3 species that have never heard of the old Council. Captain Torres says they're interested in opening diplomatic relations. Sarah nodded. The exploration fleets were perhaps the most important part of the Federation's mission. Unlike the old Council, which had imposed its will on newly discovered species, the Federation's explorers were tasked with making contact and offering cooperation without coercion. In the Memorial Project, construction is proceeding on schedule. The new Terran Memorial will be completed next year, in time for the anniversary. The memorial was Sarah's personal project, a massive structure that would list the names of every human killed in the Council's genocide attempt, but it would also include something else, the names of every species that had suffered under the Council's rule over the past 50,000 years, because that was what humanity had learned in their war against the galaxy's former rulers. They had not been the first species to be marked for sanitization. They had simply been the first to fight back successfully. Admiral Chen? A young voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah turned to see Tommy Chen, no longer the terrified 12-year-old who had survived the destruction of Kepler Station. Now, 17, he wore the uniform of a Federation diplomatic cadet. It's Ambassador Chen now, Tommy, Sarah said with a smile, though I suppose Aunt Sarah works too. Tommy had been officially adopted by Sarah after the war, one of thousands of human orphans who had lost their families to the Council's attacks. He had grown up in the new Federation, learning to work alongside species that his parents' generation had never even known existed. Ambassador, the Vrex delegation is requesting a private meeting with you. They say it's about the mining rights in the Kepler system. Sarah's expression softened. The Kepler system had been one of the first areas to be rebuilt after the war, with the Vrex mining guilds working alongside human engineers to create something unprecedented, a truly integrated interspecies colony. Tell them I'll be there in an hour. And Tommy, good work on the pronunciation. Your Vrex accent is getting much better. As Tommy hurried away, Sarah returned her attention to the view. Outside the station, in the distance, she could see the construction sites where new Federation ships were being built. These vessels were different from anything the galaxy had seen before, designed not for conquest or control, but for exploration and cooperation. Do you think we did the right thing? Elena asked quietly. Sarah considered the question. The war had cost millions of lives across dozens of species. The old galactic order had been completely destroyed, replaced by something new and untested. There were those who argued that humanity had traded one form of tyranny for another, that the Federation was just a more benevolent version of the Council. But then Sarah thought about Tommy, growing up in a galaxy where species worked together as equals. She thought about the Vrex miners who had chosen to fight alongside humans, rather than submit to the Council's authority. She thought about the Tal'Daran traders who had risked everything to provide intelligence to the human resistance. She thought about the synthetic collective units who had declared that consciousness deserved freedom, regardless of whether it was organic or artificial. Yes, she said finally, we did the right thing, not because we were perfect, but because we gave every species a choice. That's something the Council never offered. Elena nodded, then gestured toward a group of beings gathered near the station's central plaza. Speaking of choices, the Zephyrian delegation has arrived for the trade negotiations. They're the ones who've been living in isolation for the past 3,000 years, right? Sarah looked at the newcomers with interest. The Zephyrians were tall, graceful beings with skin that shifted color based on their emotions. They had been one of the first species to withdraw from galactic civilization when the Council began its expansion, choosing to live in the galactic rim rather than submit to external authority. They're also the ones who've been watching us, Sarah added. Our intelligence reports suggest they've been monitoring the Federation's activities for the past 2 years, trying to decide whether we're different from the Council. And what do you think they've concluded? Before Sarah could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the station. Not the sharp, urgent tone of a military alert, but the deeper, more measured sound that indicated an important announcement. Attention all residents of Haven Station, came the voice of the station's AI coordinator. We are receiving a long-range transmission from the Outer Rim territories. The message is marked as urgent and is addressed to the Federation Council. Sarah and Elena exchanged glances. The Outer Rim was largely unexplored territory, home to species that had never made contact with either the old Council or the new Federation. A message from that region could mean anything from a request for aid to a declaration of war. Put it through to my office, Sarah said, and alert the other Federation representatives. If this is what I think it is, we're going to need a full Council session. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in the Federation's main conference chamber, surrounded by representatives from 37 different species. The chamber itself was a work of art, designed to accommodate the various environmental needs of its occupants. Atmospheric fields separated different sections, allowing beings who breathe different gases to participate in the same discussions. The message, when it finally played, was brief but shocking. The holographic display showed a being, unlike any in the Federation's databases. It was humanoid in basic shape, but its skin had a metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with an inner light. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. Greetings to the beings of the inner galaxy. I am Prime, Coordinator Velfaxis of the Outer Rim Alliance. We have been monitoring your recent conflict with the organization you call the Galactic Council. We are impressed. The being paused, its glowing eyes seeming to look directly at each member of the Federation Council. For 50,000 years, we have watched the Council's expansion with growing concern. They claimed to bring order to the galaxy, but what they brought was stagnation. Species were classified, contained, and controlled. Innovation was discouraged. Growth was limited. The galaxy became a museum instead of a living ecosystem. Sarah felt her heart beginning to race. If this being was telling the truth, then the Federation was not the first attempt to challenge the Council's authority. We withdrew to the Outer Rim rather than submit to their authority. We have spent the millennia building our own civilization, one based on cooperation and mutual advancement. We had hoped that eventually, the inner galaxy would tire of the Council's restrictions and seek a better path. The being's expression, alien as it was, seemed to convey something that might have been approval. Your species, the humans, have accomplished something we thought impossible. You have not only defeated the Council, but replaced it with something better. You have proven that species can work together without surrendering their individuality. You have shown that the galaxy can change. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Therefore, the Outer Rim Alliance formally requests to open diplomatic relations with the Galactic Federation. We offer our knowledge, our technology, and our friendship together. We can build something that neither the Council nor the Alliance could achieve alone, a true Galactic. Civilization. The message ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Sarah looked around at her fellow representatives, seeing her own amazement reflected in their faces. Representative Korth of the hegemony species was the first to speak. If what this being says is true, then our Federation is not the only alternative. To the Council, there are others who have been working toward the same goals. The question, said Ambassador Tal Viren of the Synthetic Collective, is whether we are ready for such an alliance. The Outer Rim species have had millennia to develop their civilization. We have had only 5 years. Sarah stood up, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had led a species through its darkest hour. 5 years ago, humanity was facing extinction. Today, we're part of a federation that spans half the galaxy. We've proven that rapid change is possible when species work together. She gestured toward the display, where the message had played. This is exactly what we've been working toward, not just a replacement for the Council, but a true partnership between equals. The question isn't whether we're ready. The question is whether we're brave enough to take the next step. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Federation would send a diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim, led by Sarah herself. As the council session ended and the representatives dispersed to their various duties, Sarah found herself once again standing at the observation window. But now, instead of looking at the ships docking at Haven Station, she was looking out at the stars themselves, somewhere out there. In the vast reaches of the Outer Rim were species that had spent 50,000 years building their own vision of galactic civilization, and they wanted to work with humanity and its allies to create something even greater. It was a daunting prospect. The Federation was still young, still learning how to balance the needs of dozens of different species. Adding the complexity of an alliance with the Outer Rim would test every system they had built. But Sarah had learned something important during humanity's war against the Council. The greatest opportunities often came disguised as the greatest challenges. Admiral, Ambassador, Elena appeared beside her, carrying a datapad. The exploration fleet reports are in. The Andromeda contact mission has been even more successful than we hoped. They've identified at least 12 species interested in Federation membership. Sarah smiled. And the Memorial Project, ahead of schedule. The Vrex mining guilds have volunteered to work around the clock to ensure it's completed on time. They say it's their way of honoring the humans who died protecting their freedom. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with representing not just humanity, but all the species that had chosen to stand together against tyranny. Elena, I want you to prepare a full briefing on the Outer Rim Alliance. Everything we know about their technology, their government, their history. If we're going to build a relationship with them, we need to understand who they are. Already started, Elena replied with a grin. I had a feeling you'd want to move quickly on this. As Elena walked away, Sarah remained at the window, watching the stars. In the distance, she could see the construction lights of new Federation colonies, each one a testament to what species could accomplish when they worked together. The galaxy was changing. The old order of domination and control was being replaced by something new, a civilization based on cooperation, mutual respect, and the radical idea that every species had something valuable to contribute. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, disagreements, and challenges that no one could foresee. But for the first time in 50,000 years, the galaxy had hope, and at the center of it all was humanity. The species that had refused to accept extinction and had instead chosen to fight for a better future, not just for themselves, but for every species that dreamed of freedom. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Galactic Federation had begun, and somewhere in the vastness of space, new voices were joining the chorus of species working together to build a better galaxy. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. Sarah Chen, once an admiral in humanity's desperate war for survival, now an ambassador in the galaxy's greatest experiment in cooperation, smiled as she watched the stars. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, she was looking forward to seeing where it would lead. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and challenges yet to be discovered, and humanity, along with its allies, was ready to meet them all together.